This is our big focus this hour, as it has been all day. The 2024 United States presidential election has, of course, become one of the most intense and unpredictable in recent history. From Donald Trump's courtroom battles and a bullet grazing his ear to a dramatic debate that dashed incumbent President Joe Biden's hopes of a re-election, the campaign has been filled with unprecedented events. In fact, Kamala Harris's late entry into the race added in fact another twist, keeping the world's attention riveted on the unfolding drama. In fact, the election's intensity went far beyond American borders, making headlines worldwide. In the end, Donald Trump triumphed over Kamala Harris in a fiery contest. Trump has claimed victory in all the 7 key swing states, securing his place in history as the only second president to win the White House for a non-consecutive term. In fact, the last time this happened was in the 1800s, when Grover Cleveland served as the 22nd and the 24th president during the Civil War era. In fact, world leaders have also congratulated Trump for this victory. Prime Minister Modi has said that he is looking forward to further strengthening the India-US strategic partnership. In fact, Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu has also termed Trump's victory as one of history's greatest comebacks. In fact, Trump's victory was also marked by strong wins across more than 30 states, including pivotal battlegrounds like Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, Florida, Indiana, and Kentucky. In fact, by contrast, Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee, secured only 19 states, bringing an end to her bid for the presidency.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together. We're going to fulfill that mission. The task before us will not be easy, but I will bring every ounce of energy, spirit, and fight that I have in my soul to the job that you've entrusted to me. This is a great job. There's no job like this. This is the most important job in the world.
And of course, we'll be discussing this in detail. Joining us right now is Srinjoy Chaudhary, who's of course been covering and tracking all the updates that are coming in from the United States. Srinjoy, you've of course seen and covered a lot more elections than me, and you've of course been calling this as one of the most fiery contests in recent years as well. Help me understand what exactly is, the headline of this entire election campaign, because right now, as we speak, the numbers on our screens right now, Donald Trump is yet to cross the magic number, but he's already claimed victory. So what's been the big factor this election? Has it been immigration? Has it been some of the concerns, the tax-related concerns of the common man? What else has it been?
It's a lot of things. When you win an election or lose an election, it's not just one thing. But here, Donald Trump was very clear on one issue, and that is inflation. Now, President Biden actually did a lot of good things. A lot of his efforts ensured that America will be back on its feet. But what he did to ensure that it would happen was throw money at these programs. And there were many $1,000 billion programs. Now what that does is increase inflation. Now the rate of inflation is coming down, and economists will tell you. But something that was 100 rupees, $100 once, and became $200. Now the rate of inflation is going down, which means that it's not becoming 300, but 220 or 230. You still have to pay a big amount. Now this is something which has irked America. That's really one thing. As far as Kamala Harris is concerned, she came into it late. And perhaps she may not have been the ideal person to be the Democratic candidate. As you know, she's not won a primary in her life. Now, if you're looking for a woman candidate, even someone like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan might have been a better candidate. All that apart, the important thing is Barack Obama, in his time, built a coalition. Of course, he was hugely charismatic, but he built a coalition of educated whites, people with college degrees, blacks, Latinos, and young people. Now, that coalition seemed to be fraying, primarily because of inflation or whatever other reasons, to the extent that Obama himself has to get back into the campaign and scold black men for failing to support Kamala Harris. Now, that is a worrying thing. And that actually was a source of worry. Once you saw Barack Obama scolding black men, then you realized that they were not keen to vote. And if they were not keen to vote, then quite naturally, the support that Kamala Harris was likely to get was coming down. And if you've noticed, the percentage of people who voted for her, whether it's black, whether it's Latinos, whether it's young people, compared with the Biden government election, it has come down, even if it's by 1%, because in all these 7 swing states, the difference has been 20, 30, 40,000 votes. So if all these people do not vote, then naturally the percentage of people voting for Kamala Harris comes down. Her core voters did not come to the voting booth. That's a clear problem. The other problem is something that will be talked about for many years, perhaps, or at least for a long while, is the first decision a presidential candidate makes is of the vice president. Now, historically, the vice president has to balance the ticket. Sometimes a vice president does not matter, and even mistakes are covered up. Dan Quayle in 1988 was perhaps the worst vice presidential candidate ever, but it didn't make a difference. But in many cases, it does. You have to balance the ticket geographically, ideologically, things like that. She was left liberal. Now, it might have been better to get someone to balance the ticket, someone like Josh Shapiro. Now, Josh Shapiro is very popular in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is a state that she has lost by 2 points. If Shapiro had been on the ticket, you could argue that maybe she would have had a better chance of winning Pennsylvania, and seeing that maybe it would have created an impact in Michigan and Wisconsin. And if she'd won just these 3 states, she would have won. Of course, the argument was that Shapiro is Jewish and he's very strong on Israel, and the few Arab Americans in Michigan will be upset. But did that matter so much as winning a Pennsylvania? Maybe not. So was that a right decision? That's a question that will be talked about for a long time.
Absolutely. Shinjo, in fact, you touched upon Pennsylvania, and I want to talk more about it because I was hearing a lot of political pundits now, just a couple of days before the polling happened, talk about how the Madison Square Garden incident could actually be detrimental to Trump. We know what happened there. One of the comedians spoke about Puerto Rico, and that caused a lot of stir, and a lot of people believe that this will dent Trump's chances in Pennsylvania, but that hasn't happened. Over 50%, 50.8% right now. He seems to have turned the tide, and there seems to be some underlying factor that seems to have trumped all these other issues that seems to be going on with the Trump campaign.
You're right. You see, the thing with Pennsylvania is America is a 50-50 country. Even today, if you look at these 7 swing states, Trump has won them 52-48. 51-49. So it's about 2%. So it's a 50-50 country, and Pennsylvania is a 50-50 state. I've said this before. Eastern Pennsylvania is blue. It's unionized. It's urban. It has towns like Philadelphia. Now, if you have charisma and if you can manage, and the managerial skills to get all these voters, potential voters to the booth, then you can counteract the fact that the western half of Pennsylvania, right up to Ohio, except that area in Pittsburgh.
In fact, just to cut you short now,
yeah.
Elon Musk, who's of course been one of the biggest donors for President Trump, he had been campaigning for the past couple of weeks in Pennsylvania, particularly in Philadelphia. So clearly all the strategy had been chalked out as far as Pennsylvania is concerned.
Philly is blue. It's Democratic. Now, the idea is to get as many people from Philly and all those Scranton, where Biden is from, to the booth to counteract the fact that people from central and western Pennsylvania, with the exception of Pittsburgh, which is blue and which has a lot of young people from UPitt and Carnegie Mellon and all that, but that didn't happen. The number of votes that should have come from eastern Pennsylvania to counter the western Pennsylvanian votes, and western Pennsylvania is red. It has people who believe in hunting. It's people who are very strongly Republican.
Correct.
So as a result, it is really two states in some senses.
Correct.
There has to be enough votes out of eastern Pennsylvania to make up and to cover for the turnout that's going to come from western Pennsylvania.
Correct.
And to do that, you have to have, one, charisma, two, you have to have a good ground game. Now, if people are not keen to vote for you, then how do you win?
Absolutely. You're talking about voting now, and one of the patterns that we saw this time around, which does not usually happen, is the fact that a lot of Republicans actually turned out to vote very early. Usually you see Republicans coming out later, just on the polling day and everything, but it's a pattern that's come out this time around, and it clearly goes on to show that there was a growing sentiment that this is now or never. This is Trump's last chance, and Trump has to arrive. In fact, the entire Trump campaign has managed to get voters to the polling booth. I think that's a major factor.
Trump is some charismatic figure. Let's face it, there are people who really like Trump. Whether you like him or don't like him, there's no point saying Trump is a fascist and make disparaging points. The important thing, more than say he's fascist or whatever, is to beat him. And the way to defeat him is to get people to the booth.
Correct.
So the point is, why didn't you get people to the booth in Pennsylvania? Why? Maybe Shapiro would have made a difference because he's their guy. Why didn't you get people to the booth in Michigan? Why not in Wisconsin? That's all you needed to win these three states. You have 48% votes in all three states, but you didn't get to 50. You didn't get that 2%. Why didn't you? That's a question you have to ask. Were you not charismatic enough? Were you not likable enough? Did you not have a ground game? These are questions that the Democrats have to ask themselves.
Also, do you think the fact that Kamala Harris wasn't really an original choice for the presidential race, she carried a lot of baggage of the Biden administration, do you think that also weighed on heavily on her?
Yes, certainly you're right. But it has to be said that she's never won a primary in her life.
Correct.
Right. So if that is so, a presidential primary, now she has a very good record. She has been a good prosecutor. She has been a senator from California, all of that. But all these people in the Midwest see her as someone from California.
Correct.
Now, America is such a big country. Then she rightly, and I'll tell you this, she rightly chose a Midwesterner. But maybe instead of Tim Walz, if she'd gone with, say, Pennsylvania and Josh Shapiro, she would have been in the White House in January.
Correct.
That's one. And I'll tell you how important sometimes a vice president is. You have to balance the ticket. Now, to balance the ticket ideologically, Reagan did it with Bush, the first Bush. Now, one person who was from Massachusetts, and he realized that to balance the ticket, he needed someone to win a state. If you're going to have a vice presidential nominee, the first thing he has to do is win his state or her. And he got, I'm referring to John F. Kennedy in 1960, he got Lyndon Johnson to be his vice president. And Lyndon Johnson delivered Texas. And if he hadn't delivered Texas, it was also a very close election. John F. Kennedy would not have been president. So these are things that have to be taken into account when you're choosing your vice president. Now, maybe one day people will say that Josh Shapiro would have been a better choice.
Absolutely. I mean, now looking back at it, a lot of different things that Kamala Harris could have done. And also, you're talking about the vice presidential pick here. Donald Trump also in his victory speech mentioned a couple of times that he was not really sure about Vance in the beginning, but later as the campaign progressed, with the sort of rallies that he was addressing, he became more and more sure that this is the right pick for the vice presidential seat. In fact, before we wrap this discussion up, a quick, your understanding of what this means for India now, because everyone's talking about what the elections in the United States mean for the world, for different countries, for different regions, for wars. But for India, What does Donald Trump coming back into office mean?
Well, the view from India is the fact that we've dealt with him before, right? He and the Prime Minister get along very well.
And we have the same Prime Minister.
And we have the same Prime Minister. The other point, of course, is the fact that all this talk of tariffs is something that is going to worry India. That's one thing that will be a concern to India. Because if you're suddenly going to raise tariffs by 40%, Indian exports are going to hurt. Then India and America now have such a broad relationship. It's defense, it's strategy, Quad, Malabar, all of that, economic relationship, then science and technology, space, things like that. Now, I don't see Donald Trump saying, I don't want these things anymore. These were created during the Biden era. Let's hope he just says, okay, let's continue with it, let's go with it. And if that happens, I don't see a problem. Even among the best of friends, there will be bumps. There will be differences of opinion. And this tariff issue is something that India will be concerned about.
Absolutely. Trump will continue the way he functions. I think that's been one of his USPs there. He's constantly maintained that he's a businessman. He's not a career politician like Kamala Harris. And that is the USP. That's exactly what America needs right now. And that's, of course, been his selling point that seems to have worked. And while we say that, I continue to keep my eye on the numbers there. 270 is still eluding Donald Trump. But now I think we've reached a stage where it's not a question of when. It's not a question of whether or it'll happen or not. It's just a question of when it'll happen. Of course, Srinjoy will keep coming back to you throughout the course of the day. Of course, tracking all the updates coming in from the United States. One of the most fiercely fought contests in recent history. And of course, lots happening around the election buzz. Not just there, but in India as well. We'll of course be getting all those details. But time